Poke the Bear is brought to you by Prizepicks.
And welcome into Poke the Bear episode 339, presented by Prizepicks. Go use that promo code CLNS to get $50 back when you play just $5. And we're presented by CLNS Media. Make sure to go subscribe to the Bruins Rinkside channel on YouTube. Lots of great podcasts. We've got a lot of content coming up with the draft, free agency, off-season moves. And make sure to also go subscribe to Patriots Press Pass, Celtics All Access, the CLNS Media YouTube channel as well. Lots of great stuff over there. And then, of course, if you don't like looking at us and you're just like listening to our voices, make sure to go subscribe to Bruins Beat, Poke the Bear, Pucks with Haggs, wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever you like best. I'm Evan Marinofski. That's Conor Ryan. Connor, what is up?
Evan, doing well. How you doing?
Doing great. Doing great. It is a Tuesday. I go on vacation tomorrow, so Wednesday. I'm excited. Beaches, Hilton Head, and then Savannah. So it's like a couple days. Going to do a nice stop in both, which will be nice. If anybody has recommendations, send them my way. I'm open to them. But we have Bruins news to get to, because as much as the Devers trade has been permeating through Boston and the number one thing that everybody's talking about, 3 Bruins players are officially headed to the Olympics this coming winter. Czechia put out their first 6 players: Pavel Zacha, David Pastrnak. Not a huge surprise there. And then the USA puts out Charlie McAvoy as one of their first 6. Marchand, I know he's not a Bruin, obviously. Ooh, not a Bruin anymore. Was not one of the 6 opening ones for Canada. I'd assume he still makes it, but we'll see later on. Zacha, Pastrnak, McAvoy, I don't think there's much of a huge surprise there.
No. I think especially you look at, McAvoy, even with how the Four Nations face-off went for him personally and the injury he suffered, I think you see his value to a team like that. USA has, obviously a ton of skill all across their roster, but there's also, I think, few guys that have the skill set of McAvoy where he can just be a physical presence out there. I think you saw where his presence was missed later on in that tournament. And I think especially where he's on a team where he doesn't have to be the kind of do-it-all player or like the power play quarterback, right? You've got Quinn Hughes, you got a whole bunch of other guys that can kind of fill that role. If you can kind of be that rover, that like Ed Reed safety, right? We're just waiting back and lighting guys up and making the smart, simple play. I think, he can do that job very well. So no surprise there that McAvoy makes Team USA. He's going to play a big role there. And obviously David Pasternak's the best Czech player in the world. So it's exciting though, just to, finally see this all coming together, especially a guy like Pastrnak who, has been very vocal about not being able to, represent his country in 4 Nations, was bummed out about that. It sucks that it being at TD Garden for some of their big games that the best Czech player couldn't take the ice as well. So, and that Czech team is going to be fun. Like, I know they've had a few other players listed out there that are going to be part of it, but, Marty Necas, maybe future Bruin, maybe.
Future Bruin, there you go, future Bruin.
I think overall, it's just you're seeing some of these rosters come together. And as you said, like Canada's going to be stacked. Obviously, would not be surprised if Marchand makes that team, which is going to be, regardless of where he plays next year, I think, considering how much that has been a sought-after goal for him, that's going to be really awesome to see him, hopefully make the Olympic team. And I think there'll be a lot of other Bruins in the mix as well. I have to imagine both Lindholms are in the running for Sweden. Swayman probably still has the inside edge as probably the third goalie, especially the way he played at Worlds. And I think that probably helped out his case quite a bit, but he has to, again, I think they have until either December 1st or December 31st. I want to say it's December 31st to submit final rosters. So Swayman does need to play well, obviously, to cement that spot, because there are a lot of other goalies behind him that will be vying for most likely that number 3 spot behind Ottinger and Hellebuck. I still would go with Jake Ottinger over Hellebuck at this point.
I would too.
I digress. I'm sure we'll have plenty of time to talk about Team USA's chances, which is a fun thing to discuss in the coming months. And then you've got like Dan Zlashmelis, obviously he's going to be with Latvia, maybe Korpisalo with Finland, and who knows kind of what else kind of plays out there. But in terms of the 3 guys that make the initial roster, yeah, no surprise. I think it'll be good to see McAvoy as a key part of what's going to be a very good Team USA team. And again, you look at some of the skill that the Czech team will have. I expect kind of like how Germany, I think, is another team to keep tabs on. I think Czechia is going to be a fun team to watch, even if maybe they're not viewed as favorites going into that tournament.
It's funny because, like, on D for Team USA, I remember us talking around the Four Nations. Like, Adam Fox had a really rough showing, and a lot of people were like, oh, maybe this exposes him as, a good number one defenseman in the NHL, but not quite, a guy you want on the national stage, especially when things get physical. But it's interesting because, like, Brock Faber, I thought was fantastic. Jacob Slavin was fantastic.
Monster.
Jake Sanderson stepped up. He was great.
After getting shit on. He's like, we don't want this bum. And
that's right.
Like, I don't think people realize how good Jake Sanderson was this past year.
This incredible skater. Zach Werenski was great. McAvoy was really good in his amount of time. You have Noah Hannafin, who's an interesting, I think might be kind of a bubble guy, but he's reliable. So it's hard to knock him off. But the one guy who wasn't on there, who was in Team USA's first 6 guys, is Quinn Hughes. I think the big question is, like, who gets bumped from that USA D core? Like, obviously McAvoy's one of the 6, so he isn't. But, like, you can't not bring Slavin. You can't not bring Faber. Is Adam Fox the guy who gets bumped for, like, a Jake Sanderson? I have a tough time imagining them actually doing that. But I don't know. Like, and again, we'll see how next year goes. Like, a lot of it goes off of how, the fall NHL schedule goes, but still.
You would also think that Team USA would learn their lesson. One, get better doctors, Jesus Christ. But also, they're trying to retrofit their roster, right, with bringing in, like, bottom 6 players that kind of fit that label as opposed to just, like, loading up full lines. And I think it's an interesting conversation of, like, what is the best path, right? Is it better to have your bottom 6 be guys more suited to that role, right? Of, like, the Vinny Trocheks and, like, the Chris Kreider who looked cooked all of last year.
Brock Nelson.
Like, is that the best path? Or is it like, hey, is our third line Tage Thompson, Clayton Keller, and Kyle Connor, right? Like, should we just load up? And you would think that after the fact that they struggled to generate a lot of quality chances beyond, like, the Kachuk line for most of that tournament in 4 Nations, you hope that USA learns the lesson of adding more skill when this is the most skilled era of American skaters we've ever seen, right? Where, oh man, we have to bring in 6'11" Tage Thompson, a 40-goal center. Like, I do hope that they do add more of those players, because even if maybe they don't fit the profile of a third line, fourth line, I think skill wins out when you get to the tournament. Look at Canada. Canada is going to have, a bottom 6 loaded with 30, 40 goal scorers. I think you have to match that firepower.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it'll be interesting next year to watch. I love having the Olympics or 4 Nations more than, like, an all-star game. I know players prefer sort of a break, but who doesn't love best on best? Who doesn't love guys playing for their home countries? I feel like that's, like, and we saw this with 4 Nations. That is the best brand of hockey. I mean, I guess I'll ask you this, and this is on the spot. What's better, Stanley Cup final or USA Canada in a championship? Like, it's close. I mean, you could argue US Canada.
Are the Bruins in the Stanley Cup final? Because that will impact my decision. But,
well, that's true.
I mean, listen, I think if it's USA Canada again, gold medal a game, it's going to be one of the most anticipated games in hockey history, right? When you look at just the anticipation of the Olympic Games, best on best returning there, the hype, and clearly the animosity that came from 4 Nations, the competitiveness there, the talent involved. If that's how it ends up, which means it's going to be like Russia. It's not going to be Russia now. I was going to say if they're able to sneak one of those guys in, it's going to be like Sweden versus Germany, which would be a great story, but not what I think, at least here in North America, people are looking forward to. But if it is USA Canada, it's going to be an unbelievable matchup. And you look at both rosters, makes a lot of sense they'd meet each other in a gold medal game.
Yeah, I can't see a way in which that doesn't happen. Before we get into dev camp rosters and the latest big mock draft from The Athletic, which we're going to be talking about a lot going forward, our friends over at Prizepicks. Do you know, Ball? There's only one series left in the playoffs, and the championship is officially on the line. That means time is running out for you to put your final takes to the test over at Prizepicks, which is the best place to cash in on your favorite sports. This year's basketball playoffs are headed towards crowning a first-time champ in more than 50 years. Don't miss your last chance to cash in on history with Prizepicks. Pick more or less on players' stats like points, rebounds, assists, and more for a shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash today. Prizepicks Offers Venmo, Apple Pay, MasterCard, and more for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. And we're recording on a Tuesday, Connor, which means it's Taco Tuesday. And you get some good old-fashioned deals when you're picking more or less on player stats. So download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, that's code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prizepicks, run your game. Run your game over there at Prizepicks. So, Dev Camp roster is out. Obviously, it's preliminary. In meaning that, when the Bruins make their draft picks, those guys will be added to the list. Dan Zox-Mellis, not on the list. Oscar Jelvik, not on the list. I'll run through the forwards real quick. Dalton Bancroft, Andre Gasso, Beckett Hendrickson, Dean Letourneau, Brett Link, Jonathan Morello, Logan Morell, Casper Nason, Chris Pelosi, Ryan Walsh, who is just doing off-ice activities, Ethan Whitcomb, Will Zellers. That's a really interesting one we'll get to in a bit. On D, Jackson Edward, CJ Foley, Ty Gallagher, Elliot Grenwald, Luke Johansson, Christian Kostadinsky. God, these names trip me up every time.
Yeah.
This one doesn't. Ben Robertson.
Dan Smith, BYU.
Dan Smith, BYU. In net, Albin Boyja from Maine, Cameron Corpy, and then Philip Svedback in net. So that, I don't think people are like dying to go watch those guys or watch all of them. I don't think, there's a couple names that pop off the page there that you really want to see. But the big storyline of Dev Camp will be the draft picks they make, the number 7 pick, the 2 second rounders. But then also, again, Dean Letourneau, what's he like after a full season of college hockey at BC? Will Zellers, first time doing anything in black and gold. So I think to me, those are sort of the things I think most people are looking at going into this Dev Camp.
Yeah, and I even think you look at the camp invites, right, which isn't a foregone conclusion. The guys you get invited to Dev Camp are, signing with the Bruins. But I think you look at Albin Boya, a guy at Maine who has the ties to the Bruins, right, with a fellow Maine goalie in Jeremy Swayman, but has been, without a doubt, one of the best goalies in college hockey the last 2 years. He's going back to Maine again. I have to imagine he's once again going to be one of the top goalies in college hockey. And if you're the Bruins and you are trying to find ways to, find the next guy or a guy to pair up with Jeremy Swayman, a guy like Boya, who's played well, comes from a goalie factory in Maine, makes a lot of sense. So that's definitely a guy I would like to keep tabs on, talk to him, see what that communication is with the Bruins. Because if they are trying to find ways, and the Bruins love to, shore up critical areas by, targeting undrafted college free agents. You saw it with Krug and a few other players, but if they're able to bring in a guy like Boya in a couple of years, he makes a lot of sense. But yeah, beyond the guys that they are going to draft next weekend, definitely Will Zellers is a guy that I think a lot of Bruins fans are keyed in on, that going into his first year at North Dakota, lit up the USHL. I think anytime a prospect pipeline that is so starved for scoring talent, when you saw what Zellers did, I think a lot of Bruins fans, the radar is up on a player like that. But I also think looking at some players that maybe fly under the radar, but if you're projecting them in a couple of years of maybe, middle 6, third line type players that could play a critical role, like I think Chris Pelosi is a guy worth keeping tabs on, who I think took steps forward. Ryan Walsh was a pain in the ass for Cornell, a really, really good player. That was a good value add.
I think that's a steal in the 6th. I'm not just saying that because he's a new guy. Like Ryan Walsh is so fun to watch, and he's just a gamer.
And the same thing with like Gasso, right? Where it's again, all these players. I'm not saying they're going to be middle 6 NHLers, third line players, but I think they're also players that can step into roles. Have shown that they have a lot to offer down at the college level, and are poised to grow even more. So I think Gasso could be a captain next year, or a guy that's playing a critical role for a very good BC team. So I think those types of players that maybe have been in the system for a couple of years, maybe Bruins fans aren't as familiar with them. They've been looking at the Lysells, the Merkulovs, and I think, you're going to have that gap, right, between like the Lysells and those players and the Jake O'Briens, whoever they draft this year. But I think there is kind of this gap, right, from 22 to 24, where you're trying to see if you can get any value out of those guys. So obviously Letourneau, but I would also keep tabs on the Pelosi's and some of those other players.
Absolutely, because those guys are going to provide depth for sure. And I even like a Grenwald on D, I like him a lot. He had a nice freshman year at Quinnipiac over there with Pelosi. Letourneau's an interesting one though, because and you touched on him a little bit there at the end. Like, you do wonder, and we've talked at length about Letourneau, and what would he look like if he was in the USHL for a year versus what he was at BC for a year. Never scored a goal, wasn't super productive, was up and down the lineup, didn't really find a certain spot. I am curious to see what he's like at dev camp. Is he taking charge? Is he driving play? Is he more physical? Last year, I remember him getting knocked down quite a bit, coming out of U18 hockey, jumping into playing with guys who are in college and junior. So I think those are going to be big things with him. I still think the big thing with Letourneau is next year. Like, even if he looks phenomenal at dev camp, even if he's out there dangling guys and going top corner and all that fun stuff, like, that's great and that's encouraging. But what is he as a sophomore at BC? That to me is the biggest thing with him. Can he be productive? Doesn't need to be a point per game guy, but can he jump into that, 0.75 point per game rate, being a productive member of that BC forward group who, their recruiting class wasn't insane. Now they've recruited kids from the CHL who are nasty, and they probably might recruit some more. And you've got Haggs coming back, and you've got Stiga, you've Gasso. So like, you will have legit guys up there. He is going to have to battle to get into that top six. And I wonder with a guy like Letourneau, and this is just spitballing. This is completely just throwing stuff against the wall, but just, off the top of my head, with the CHL being the way it is and recruiting from the CHL being the way it is, wouldn't shock me if Letourneau's a guy that if things don't work out this year at BC, and this is not insider information, by the way, this is like legitimately just speculating, wouldn't be shocked if he's a guy who hits the transfer portal. Wouldn't be shocked if he's like, I want to go be in a number one center role, or I want to go have a top six spot at, I would have said a Northeastern, but he decommitted from Northeastern to go to BC, but like, go somewhere like a UConn or somewhere like that, where, you're getting more reps. If BC continues to bring in these CHL guys, I think you're going to see your BUs, your Nodaks, your Denvers, your Michigans and Michigan States do these things. And for a project like Letourneau, that's a kind of guy who gets sort of passed over. Now, it would say a lot if Letourneau could carve out a spot in the top six with all that talent. Like, it's facing adversity, that's overcoming it, that's going to help him in a lot of different ways. But I don't know. It just wouldn't shock me if, if things don't work out this year, he's looking for a different place. And that's not like cause for concern either. That's college hockey now.
Yeah. I mean, you look at just how important it is for him to take steps forward. And I feel like the stock obviously is probably at an all-time low coming off the year he had, but how much does it change the complexion of this Bruins kind of prospect pipeline? If you have your number 7 pick, you hit on a few talented players or intriguing prospects, at least we'll say, in the second round, you're feeling good about where you're at with, adding guys like Fraser Mitten, Will Zellers. If like Dean Letourneau as a sophomore has 17 to 21 points as a sophomore,
yes,
how much that also changes things. Like, maybe we do have a player. Maybe he's not a top 6 center, but like, hey, maybe this guy could be a matchup nightmare 3C down the road. Like, if he just at least looks like a player, it does, ease some of the burden or some of the concern, right? Over.
Yeah, I know you mean. I know you mean.
I do think that would be a game changer for this, prospect pool in the system that just needs talent. So, yeah, it's a lot of pressure on the guy, but I think when you look at the ceiling that he does have, the risk involved with, the variance as to what he could be in pro hockey, and what he's working out from, right, coming off of that freshman year, a lot of eyes are going to be on him this year, fair or unfair, just off of, what I think, is he going to be Tage Thompson? Probably not. I think, those expectations are dropped just a little bit, but I still think there's a lot to like about that skill set. It's just, what can he do to take steps forward? Is he adding muscle? Is he being a little bit more assertive with that size, right? Like, that's a guy who's kind of a perimeter player a little bit this past year. Again, jumped, I think, 2 or 3 levels ahead of what he probably should have been doing this past season. But
yeah,
if you're seeing some of that growth, and I still think he's probably a full-year player in college hockey, I think he still could add value. And if he does at least show some signs, it is probably a huge bit of relief for the Bruins as they try to see what they have in a former first-round pick.
I mean, there's a world in which that first year is an anomaly. There's a world in which he comes out this year and is terrific and continues to grow each year in BC and is fantastic. And like, maybe it was just a huge jump. I mean, we don't see players going from prep school to college anymore and being successful. Also, like one-off years are normal. I mean, think about like the NTDP. U17 years are typically bad. Like kids have really bad stats as U17s, and then U18 they flourish. Not every player, but there are quite a few. I think Brady Tkachuk wasn't fantastic in his first year as a U17. There are tons of examples like that. So again, it's at a higher level, but it wouldn't shock me if Letourneau ends up being a legit player and a guy who, pays dividends for you down the road. I want to get into the mock draft because that's what I think a lot of people, if you have a subscription to The Athletic and read that story, you were like, oh, geez. But first, make sure to go subscribe to Bruins Rinkside over on YouTube. Hit that like button. Hit the notification so you know when an episode drops. You can watch the premiere. You can also join the live stream and watch that as soon as it happens. We will have one for the NHL draft. I will say this. Carl Corzini has agreed to be on it. So maybe the whiteboard.
Break out the whiteboard.
Maybe the whiteboard makes an appearance, baby. So make sure to subscribe there. Go to subscribe to Poke the Bear on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, and make sure to go give some love to CLNS's awesome other content, Patriots Press Pass, Celtics All Access, those YouTube channels. Go subscribe there right now. So The Athletic put out a mock draft, or Corey Pronman did, picking all 224 picks, which he does this every year. And I actually love this, not just to look at Bruins, but I like to see it as a gauge for my New England guys, how they're going to do. I believe 4 New Englanders total were picked in this. Carter Amico was the last pick of the second round to the New Jersey Devils, which terrific. Happy he's in the second rounder. Everett Baldwin was picked. Teddy Mutrin was picked. Caden Harrington was picked. That's great. So my New Englanders it's not a strong year for New Englanders, but at least they were picked. First round though, that's what you listeners and Connor, you and I care about the most. I'll read it in order. So he has Matthew Schaefer going to the Islanders at 1, Michael Misa at 2 to the Sharks, Anton Frundell at 3 to the Blackhawks, Brady Martin at 4 to Utah. So there you go. That Brady Martin pick going up higher and higher. That kid's eating. Number 5 to the Predators, Caleb Desnoyers. Number 6 to the Flyers, Jake O'Brien. Seems to be higher than I'm seeing him going in most mock drafts, but makes sense. Number 7, Corey Pronman has the Bruins taking Roger McQueen. Now, for context, the Kraken take James Higgins at 8 in this mock draft, and Porter Martone goes to the Sabres at 9. Radomurka goes to the Ducks at 10. So definitely a crazy mock draft. You can agree with it. You can disagree with it. I think the one thing we can agree on is that these first top 10 picks, I think are going to be hard to pick. They're going to be all over the place. I don't think we can sit here and safely say, well, the Bruins are definitely, this isn't like the Patriots. They're taking Will Campbell or they're taking Drake May. Like this could be anybody in that sort of that top 10 stratosphere. But McQueen at 7, I think is controversial enough. But to take McQueen with Higgins and Martone there in this mock draft, to me is really risky and a huge swing. I don't like this. I would not sign off on this. I would probably go Higgins, Martone, McQueen there in my ranking of guys I'd want. But McQueen is a big swing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to, and I agree, I think the bigger holdup there is the other options available, right? Where, again, you got 2 very different types of players in terms of centerman between Higgins and McQueen. Higgins is what, 5'11", 5'10". McQueen's what, 6'5". So I do think that it depends on what the Bruins are prioritizing there, but there's a lot of risk involved with McQueen with the back injury. I know it says he's healthy now, but is that something that's going to linger and, crop up when he's 23, 24, 25, or is, is going to impact him later on in his career as well? Had good numbers early on, but then also I think it was Scott McLaughlin of WEI who said that a lot of his points came against the worst team in the league. He kind of piled on points.
First game of the year.
Yeah, something like that. I think he piled on a lot of his points against some crappy teams, which you do you. Take advantage of the matchups in front of you.
That pattern.
But I think from the Bruins perspective, if that's, let's say it is like Haggs and McQueen, I still think Haggs has the higher upside, but maybe let's say if it's McQueen's there and it's O'Brien, or if it's like McQueen and Denoyer or someone like that, or like Martone, which I think we spoke about on Bruins Beat, of like Martone is like a top line caliber winger. It's just for the Bruins, if like you're hoping this is the only time you're going to be in the top 10 for the next couple of years, that's what they're hoping. Are they viewing it more as, hey, Denoyer is a safer pick, but he's probably a 2C, whereas McQueen, I don't know, but like to what we've said before, he could be Ryan Getzlaf, right? He could be an 80.65 force of nature. There's no guarantee he is that, but if the Bruins are trying to swing for the fences, which they kind of did last year with Gene Letourneau, and you're in that spot now. I do wonder, though, if they're just trying to swing for the fences here and get the best ceiling amongst that grouping. But I agree that if it's, between him and Haggs, I take Haggs.
I would too. And I think the funny thing with McQueen is you mentioned sort of that upside. And it's like if McQueen hits and he's a number one center, we're sitting there 5 years later going, man, Don Sweeney, what a move. Like that took balls. That's a phenomenal reach like that. No one else would do it. And he did it. He deserves, and that staff deserves commending for. But if that misses and he isn't what we think he can be, and he isn't, and he does have those back injuries and those linger, well, we're sitting here 5 years from now saying, well, who should be the next GM of the Bruins? Like, who are they hiring as their head of scouting now? Like, that's the kind of move, if it misses, that gets a whole staff fired.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing, is if you're going to take that swing, you have to acknowledge that. And Sweeney has been here a long time, so he does have the clout, so to speak, to make a pick like that. This isn't a first or second year GM. And, he just signed an extension for 2 years. So he has about 3 years left total that he's under contract for. Maybe he does say, you know what, this could be it. Like if I go down swinging, then I go down swinging, but we're taking this guy because look at what he could be. And if he ends up hitting, then you've hit the jackpot. And to me, like if Haggs is available, I'm taking Haggs. I'm with you. Like, what's the floor there? 65 point a year center, or like maybe he moves to the wing, but you're still getting high-end offensive production. I keep going back to like, what does this team lack? Skating, skill, offensive production. Haggs fills all of those roles. And, McQueen's a good skater for his size, and he has phenomenal hands and skill and all those things, but you just can't count on him with the injury history. Like that's what I keep going back to, of like, if they pick McQueen, I won't be against the pick because I don't like the player. Like I really like the player. He looks like a Bruin. He freaking built like a Bruin. But it's the injury history. It's the swing you're taking on hoping that back stays intact and that he's okay. And like that, and I am seeing more mock drafts with McQueen at 7. And I think Pronman's been pretty steady with this. I think he had a mock draft like a month ago. It's either him or Wheeler who had McQueen at 7. But with Martin now moving into potentially the top 5, like you're probably going to have a player there at 7 that you didn't think you'd have 3 months ago. I don't know, man. Like that's where I worry about McQueen. And I'm not just doing it because you took Letourneau last year. Like that plays a part in it. But you can't make your picks every year because of who you took the year before. I just think if this has to hit, this player has to be a productive guy for you for a long time in your top 6.
Yeah.
There's not a guarantee of that with McQueen. Also, there's no guarantee with any of these players. Let's make sure that's well known, but some are better than others.
Yeah, I think I agree with what you said. Like, I don't think McQueen's a bum, right? Like, I think there's a lot to like about what he brings, but it's almost like, all right, on draft night, if they take Caleb Denoyer or Brady Martin or one of these guys that maybe has a lower ceiling, I think we'll all be like, oh, they're getting a good player. They're getting a player that's going to be in the NHL. I think we all agree on that, right? Regardless of what you think they could be at hockey's highest level. Take James Haggs, you're like, that's really good value for they getting him, right? I think that would be the general consensus.
Thought he was going to be long gone. Top.
If they take McQueen, I think it's like, ooh, they better be friggin' right. Like I think that's what it is. Like you like the highlight reel, you like the potential, but you better be right. I think is how the overall consensus is. Not an indictment on his own skill set or what he's been doing or anything like that, but you're inviting more risk with a guy like McQueen. But again, if you're at number 7 and it is between, let's say, him and Desnoyers, maybe it's the Bruins view him as just having the higher upside. And to your point, if Sweeney has to, add legitimate star talent internally, maybe they just swing for the fences, right or wrong. And maybe that is how they approach this going forward.
And that's why I go back to like that, picking McQueen and missing is the type of pick that gets a GM fired. Now you could make the case that if they pick Haggs at 7 and he isn't nearly what we think he is and he misses, or they pick Desnoyers or Martone and those guys miss, the chances go up. But McQueen, to me, given the questions coming in, if they're like, hitting the table going, nope, we're sure this kid's, his back is fine. Our doctors have looked at him. We're good. We see his physicals. We like what we see. We're putting all our chips to the middle of the table, and this misses. And James Haggs goes to the Kraken, and he's fantastic. And
Porter Martone, so sad sending him to that team.
I know he doesn't. Jimmy doesn't deserve that. Jimmy does not deserve to be sent to Seattle. And like Porter Martone goes to the Sabres, and he's a productive top line winger for them. That's when Sweeney is ushered out. Like, honestly, like for Bruins fans who hate John Sweeney, you should be rooting for the McQueen pick.
Yeah, no.
Like if that misses, you might be looking at a new GM. So we'll see. Again, it's just a mock draft. Just a mock draft. There's no guarantee Jake O'Brien goes.
It's just a prank, bro.
Exactly. It's just a prank. In terms of just real quick, like who they picked in the second, according to Pronman. And again, these are basically Pronman's own picks. Bruins at 51 picked. I don't know if I can pronounce this. Max.
Stefan Nason?
Yeah, Stefan Nason. I still can't get over that. Yeah. For people who don't get that reference, go listen to the last Bruins beat. Max Seinica, if I'm saying that correctly. I hope I am. 6'5" defenseman with Portland in the WHL, which again, not a huge surprise. I expect the Bruins to I think we both expect the Bruins to take a big right shot defenseman somewhere in the second. And then Tyler Hopkins with Kingston in the OHL, 6'1" center. They have, or Pronman has them taking him at 61. So I think the second round's almost kind of clear, and that they're probably going to take a big right shot defenseman, and then probably
wing,
a center,
maybe
a wing too, like a forward, which I guess that isn't super clear. We both said, oh, it's super clear, and then pick different positions. So maybe it isn't. And also, like, I don't think it's official that they're taking a center at number 7. Like, if Porter Martone is there, that's a hard guy to pass up. Like, we both think he's going earlier than 7, but if he's sitting there, like, I don't know, maybe. So we'll see. More mock drafts coming. We have our own mock drafts coming later this week, which are interesting and thankfully different, which I'm happy about. I like that this draft is not like fully clear, and we have different picks no matter who's making them. Connor, what can the people look forward to from you over at the Globe and Boston.com?
Yeah, you can read my stuff over at Boston.com and the Boston Globe. We have covered every step of the way this Bruins off season, whether it's the draft, free agency, trades, offer sheets, all that good stuff. So you can read all of my stuff over there at, again, Boston.com and the Boston Globe. If you want to follow me on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it these days, you can at Conor Ryan _93.
Go do all that. That's Conor Ryan. I'm Evan Marinofski. Poke the Bear listeners. Have a great rest of your week.